Davies.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Jonathan Richman.
Thank you, Chairman Abrams and panel and colleagues for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jonathan Richman. I work for a digital relationship marketing agency called Bridge Worldwide. I also write an online blog called Dose of Digital. I'm here today to really talk about sort of the different types of information that go into an adverse event report and sort of what the overall responsibility should be for different companies. And I'm sort of come at this from experience in working with different companies and sort of seeing how your average rank and file marketer thinks about this, what they believe the regulations are, and sort of how it's kind of changing their behavior and how I might be able to clarify some of those bits as well. So good timing that I'm right after Melissa, so you just saw this one already. This is obviously data that's been spread around quite a bit and isn't disputed certainly by marketers that I've talked with. And where I find the sort of problem is how do you sort of define each of these individual pieces? So how far do I need to go to define any one of these? What does the term quote unquote identifiable actually mean as we sort of go online and people aren't necessarily using their real names any longer? So what I did was actually pull some real comments from a number of different sources. This one is from iGuard, a site where patients can rank and put comments about their typical treatments. This is one that you see here. So a person talking about Lipitor and a little bit about what possibly happened while they're on it. So the question is this a reportable adverse event by the standards that exist today? So if we sort of break it down by individual pieces, is this person an identifiable patient? Well, we see a 72-year-old female followed by a 73-year-old female and some sort of time stamp that maybe get a little bit to that information, but is it really important that we even know this person's name? So is this identifiable? In the case of course, the 3500 form, as soon as you touch that first box on there, you instantly get this message which says you don't really want to use the person's name or social security number. So does that imply that I don't need to know that anyway? And some of those bits of information that were already in their message might be enough already. In the case of identifiable reporter, in a number of cases, it's usually the same person. So a person talking about an experience that they've had versus reporting about somebody else. But of course, there is the alternative too, in a case where somebody is talking about an experience of a loved one or somebody that they know. This is also, again, a real-life example. I've sort of crossed out the names here, sort of protect a little bit of their identity. What we see here is essentially somebody talking about an experience that their father had. I don't mean to pick on Lipitor. It hurts to be number one sometimes, but speaking about specific experience that they had on Lipitor. So the question is, and I've crossed out their names, but for the sake of this argument, let's assume that their screen name, their handle was called Health Guy. And so what you do have is a little bit of information about Health Guy. And what I kind of have there is a screenshot of what that person's profile looks if you sort of went into it to try and find out a little bit more. So I'll see in a minute how that sort of plays out as to whether or not that's the right amount of information for a reporter. Is a simple handle good enough now? The next one is specific drug, which of course shows up quite a bit, but of course there are a number of examples where people can't recall either the drug that they were on, or they may be talking about somebody else, maybe a parent or a friend, where they're not sure of all the different medications that they're on, and can sort of hint at a little bit of the product that they're on. A little bit more rare, but it certainly does happen as well. But is there enough in the context of this, not only this answer, but also the ones that it's surrounding, where you could determine what this drug is? And I think I could from looking at all the other posts, which I've kind of cut out of here. And of course, the last one is an adverse or the fatal outcome, which is reasonably straightforward, of course, to figure out. But the question is, for a lot of marketers, the piece that I hear is what exactly needs to be reported when? So I hear everything from it needs to be reported in 24 hours or 15 days or quarterly or yearly or 5 years. The point where, your average marketer is paralyzed by the idea that anytime somebody says, I have a headache from taking your drug, that they need to file a report in the next 5 minutes or else be sued or all sorts of other problems. Of course, that's not the case, but some additional clarity on the sort of serious and life-threatening versus unexpected could do a lot here as well. Of course, in the old days when there was papers and pens and doctors collected a lot of this information, or patients called into our phone numbers, it was very easy to make sure that we could collect all the bits of information. We can continue to ask questions until we had all four of the criteria. Of course, it's not the reality anymore. So going back to the example that I showed before, and all four of these parts in this actual real-world example, the question becomes do these actually meet all four of these? And I apologize, my number one and number two are backwards here. But is health guy good enough for an identifiable reporter? Is my father, quote unquote, good enough to be an identifiable patient in this case? So the question is how far do we want to go to turn pharma companies or physicians or medical device companies into sort of sleuths to find out this information? And the WeGo Health information, I think, is really important. And how far do patients want us to go to actually figure out that information as well? So, for example, if this person sends a tweet instead, Health Guy is very prolific online. He sends out a tweet as well. Do we want to follow him back to his blog and then figure out who his ISP is and figure out the real name? We probably could do that, but at some point, does it become too much? So is new guidance needed here, and sort of the reality that it isn't pad and paper anymore? It's not a doctor necessarily taking down this information or a call center. So if we go through, just for example, the identifiable reporter, does the form become, instead of this, something as simple as this, where there's recognizing the reality that simply a handle and the website that they were on may be a good enough piece of information. Obviously not necessarily to replace the former way of doing it, but perhaps a little bit of a change might be necessary as well, or a different type of option. So those are, of course, the different criteria. So if you go through each of those, at what point, for further clarification for each of the marketers that I speak with, could do a lot to sort of go to ensure that they actually are collecting these events, that they actually go out and do more monitoring. What's happening now is they're not totally clear on these, and instead they're just choosing not to look, which is sort of defeating the entire purpose of having the monitoring and reporting process anyway. That's my testimony.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions?